The emergency alert pierced through the quiet halls of the Arcadian Medical Station Epsilon, its distinctive three-tone signal indicating an incoming critical patient. Dr. Reyna Tseri's crystalline antennae vibrated in response as she hurried toward the receiving bay, her iridescent scales shifting from their usual calm blue to an anxious green. Incoming patient from Deep Space Rescue Operation, the automated system announced. Human. Male. Multiple system trauma. Reyna's pace faltered for just a moment. In her 3 cycles as a medical officer, she had never treated a human before. Her knowledge of their physiology came purely from theoretical training modules, and humans were notoriously complex compared to most spacefaring species. The bay doors hissed open, revealing a team of emergency responders rushing in with a hover stretcher. On it lay a human male, his skin an unusual pale color that Reyna's training indicated was definitely not normal for their species. His breath came in short, irregular gasps, and dark red blood. Iron-based, she reminded herself, seeped through his pressure suit. Commander James Chen, one of the responders reported, reading from a glowing datapad. Found in a damaged escape pod at the edge of the Carina Nebula. Pod's life support was failing when our rescue team reached him. Reyna's medical scanner hummed as she passed it over the commander's body. The readings made her scales ripple with concern. Multiple internal injuries, severe dehydration, and she paused, puzzled by one particular reading. His cellular energy production is incredibly elevated, far beyond normal parameters for any species I know. That's humans for you, Dr. Kvex, her superior, remarked as he joined her. The older Arcadian scales held the deep purple of experience. Their bodies can push themselves far beyond what should be physically possible. It's what makes them so fascinating and so dangerous to treat. As they moved Commander Chen to a treatment pod, Reyna noticed something else unusual. Despite his unconscious state, his muscles remained tensed, as if ready for action. The scanner showed elevated levels of various compounds she didn't recognize. "Doctor," a nurse called out, "his neural patterns are unlike anything in our database." Reyna moved to the neural monitor and felt her scientific curiosity overwhelm her initial anxiety. The human's brain was exhibiting activity patterns that would suggest consciousness in an Arcadian, yet he was clearly unconscious. More intriguing were the irregular spikes in what appeared to be the emotional processing centers. "Remarkable," she whispered. "Even unconscious, his brain is incredibly active. It's as if he's fighting," Dr. Kvex finished. "Humans have something they call survival instinct. It's not just a conscious response. Their entire biology is geared toward persistence against impossible odds." As if to prove the point, Commander Chen's body suddenly jerked, and his vital signs spiked. Reyna acted instinctively, administering a standard sedative, only to watch in shock as his system metabolized it in seconds. "Standard protocols won't work here," Dr. Kvex warned. "Human biology doesn't follow the rules we're used to. You'll need to adapt, think differently. Are you prepared for that challenge, Dr. Tsari?" Reyna looked down at her patient's face, noting the strange furrows in his brow that indicated what humans called pain. Her scales shifted to a determined gold as she made her decision. "Yes, doctor. I want to understand. I need to understand." Over the next several hours, Reyna found herself constantly surprised by her human patient. His body responded to treatments in unexpected ways, sometimes metabolizing medications too quickly, other times showing surprising sensitivity to standard procedures. Every time she thought she had a grasp on his physiology, something new would emerge to challenge her understanding. What fascinated her most was his body's remarkable ability to maintain homeostasis despite grievous injuries. Where most species would simply shut down, Commander Chen's system kept fighting, kept adapting, kept surviving. "His cellular repair rate is extraordinary," she reported to Dr. Kvex during their 3rd hour of treatment. "It's as if each cell has its own survival imperative." "That's what makes humans so remarkable," Kvex replied. his scales showing the blue-green pattern of scientific fascination. They're not necessarily stronger or faster than other species, but they simply refuse to give up. Their bodies reflect their spirit. As the immediate crisis passed and Chen's condition stabilized, Raina found herself stationed by his bed, studying the readings with intense interest. She had so many questions. How had he survived in a failing pod for so long? What mechanisms allowed his body to keep functioning under such extreme stress? What other surprises would human physiology reveal? You know, Dr. Kvek said, joining her on his rounds, there's an old saying among those who treat humans regularly. Expect the impossible, then prepare for something even more remarkable. His scales flickered with amusement. I think you're about to understand exactly what that means. Raina nodded, her antennae quivering with anticipation. Something told her this was just the beginning of a much larger adventure in understanding. The medical station's artificial day cycle was just beginning when Commander Chen showed the first signs of consciousness. Raina, who had been analyzing his latest neural scans, nearly dropped her datapad when she noticed his brainwave patterns shifting. Heart rate increasing, neural activity spiking, the monitoring system announced. Consciousness threshold approaching. Raina watched in fascination as Chen's eyes flickered open, revealing irises of a deep brown color, another uniquely human trait. His gaze darted around the room, showing none of the confusion typical in patients waking from trauma. Instead, his eyes were sharp, alert, immediately assessing his surroundings. You're on Arcadian Medical Station Epsilon, Raina said quickly, remembering her training about human stress responses. I'm Dr. Tseri. You're safe. Chen's voice came out rough but steady. My crew. The question surprised her. Most species' first questions upon waking concern their own condition. You were found alone in an escape pod. Do you remember what happened? His heart rate increased further, and Raina noticed an unusual surge of chemicals in his bloodstream. Research vessel. We were studying gravitational anomalies in the Carina Nebula. Something went wrong. The ship. He tried to sit up, wincing as his injuries protested. Please remain still, Raina urged, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Your body's cellular repair processes are remarkable, but you still need time to heal. To her surprise, Chen laughed, a sound that made her antennae vibrate with unexpected pleasure. You sound impressed, Doctor. I am, she admitted. Your survival defies several laws of biology as we understand them. Your pod's life support had failed hours before rescue. By all known medical science, you should have died. Chen finished, his lips curving in what Raina recognized as a smile. We humans have a bad habit of ignoring what should be possible. Before Raina could respond, her instruments detected another surge of unusual compounds in Chen's system. His heart rate accelerated again, and his skin began producing excess moisture. Sweat, she recalled from her studies. Commander, are you experiencing distress? She asked, concerned by the readings. My crew, he said again, more urgently. I need to know if there are any other rescue operations in progress. They could still be out there. Raina's scales shifted to a concerned purple. Commander, your body is still recovering from severe trauma. This level of stress could compromise your healing process. With all due respect, Doctor, stress is the least of my concerns when my people might be in danger. The monitoring systems began chiming warnings as Chen's vital signs continued to escalate. Raina prepared to administer a sedative, then hesitated, remembering how quickly his system had processed the last one. More importantly, she recalled her studies about human emotional responses, how they were intricately linked to physical recovery. Making a decision that went against her traditional training, she instead pulled up the station's rescue operation feeds on a nearby screen. There are currently 3 search vessels scanning the nebula sector where you were found, she explained, watching as his vital signs responded to the information. No other pods have been located yet, but the search is ongoing. To her amazement, simply having this information seemed to help stabilize Chen's condition. His heart rate began to normalize, and the stress compounds in his blood decreased. This contradicted everything she'd been taught about managing patient anxiety. "Thank you," Chen said softly. "Most alien doctors I've met would have just sedated me. I'm learning that human medical care requires adaptation," Raina replied, her scales shifting to a thoughtful blue-green. "Your species' emotional responses appear to be as important to healing as physical treatment." Chen's smile returned. "We're complicated that way. Mind and body aren't as separate for us as they are for many species." He paused, studying her with an intensity that made her scales ripple. "You're different from other Arcadian doctors I've met. Most of them treat us like puzzles to be solved, not people to be understood." Raina felt her scales flush with a combination of embarrassment and pleasure. "You are puzzles," she admitted, "but fascinating ones. For instance, right now your body is producing several compounds that our sensors can't even identify, seemingly in response to our conversation." "Really?" Chen looked intrigued. "What color are your scales now?" "I've been trying to decode Arcadian color shifting, but I never got the hang of it." The question caught her off guard, and she felt her scales shift rapidly through several hues before settling on a diplomatic neutral tone. "That's not relevant to your treatment, Commander." His laugh returned, sending those strange, pleasant vibrations through her antennae again. "Your scales just gave me more of an answer than words could, Doctor." Before she could respond, the station's alert system activated. "Incoming emergency transmission from search vessel Horizon. Additional escape pods located. Multiple human life signs detected." Chen immediately tried to sit up again, and this time, Raina didn't stop him. Instead, she adjusted his bed to a sitting position, supporting him as his body protested the movement. His vital signs were spiking again, but somehow she knew that trying to keep this information from him would be more damaging than letting him process it. "Your adaptation to human patients is impressive, Dr. Tisari." Dr. Kovex's voice came from the doorway. Her superior's scales showed an intriguing pattern of surprise and approval. "Most Arcadian doctors take years to understand that sometimes the best treatment for humans is simply letting them be human." As they waited for news about the rescue operation, Raina continued to monitor Chen's readings, documenting the remarkable ways his body responded to emotional stimuli. She was beginning to understand that treating humans wasn't just about managing their physical condition. It was about understanding the complex dance between their bodies, minds, and that uniquely human quality they called spirit. The rescue of Commander Chen's crew should have been a moment of triumph. Instead, Raina found herself facing the greatest challenge of her medical career. As the survivors were brought into the medical station, she quickly realized that their conditions were far worse than Chen's had been. "Multiple casualties incoming," the station AI announced. 5 humans. Critical condition. Severe radiation exposure. Raina's scales paled to an alarmed white as she processed the preliminary scans. The crew had been exposed to an unknown form of radiation from the gravitational anomaly they'd been studying. Their cells were degrading at an alarming rate, and standard Arcadian radiation protocols were proving ineffective. "Their cellular structure is collapsing," Dr. Kovex announced, his scales a grim gray. "Standard treatments aren't working. We need to put them in stasis until we can develop a proper protocol." "No." Commander Chen's voice rang out from his bed, where he was monitoring the situation. "Human bodies don't handle long-term stasis well. The cellular damage would be irreversible." Raina found herself torn between her superior's traditional approach and her growing understanding of human physiology. "Commander Chen is correct," she said, her scales shifting to determined gold. "Human tissue responds poorly to artificial suspension. We need another solution." "Then what do you suggest, Dr. Tisari?" Kovex challenged. "Their bodies are being destroyed from the inside out." Raina's antennae quivered as she accessed her neural interface, rapidly reviewing everything she'd learned about human biology. "Their natural healing processes. Commander Chen, you said humans ignore what should be possible. How do your bodies do that?" Chen's eyes lit up with understanding. Adaptive cellular response. Our bodies don't just heal damage. They learn from it. It's why we can build immunity to poisons, develop resistance to radiation. Exactly. Reyna's scales flickered with excitement. We don't need to stop the damage. We need to help their bodies adapt to it. Commander, your cellular structure shows signs of partial adaptation to the radiation already. Your pod must have received a lower dose, giving your body time to begin developing resistance. Are you suggesting we use Commander Chen's adapted cells to treat the others? Kivex's scales showed skepticism. That's completely unprecedented. The risk of rejection would be minimal. Reyna interrupted, her medical training crystallizing into insight. Humans already have mechanisms for accepting cells from other humans. They call it transfusion medicine. We could use the Commander's adapted cells as a template, replicate the adaptation process, and introduce it to the others. It's never been done, Kivex protested. That's what they said about human spaceflight, Chen remarked with a grim smile. And here we are. Do it, Dr. Tiseri. Use whatever you need from me. The next hours were a blur of intense activity. Reyna worked frantically, combining Arcadian cellular replication technology with human medical principles in ways that had never been attempted. She extracted samples from Chen's bone marrow, where his body's adaptation to the radiation was strongest, and used the station's quantum processors to accelerate the replication process. Cellular degradation continuing in all patients, the medical AI reported. Organ failure imminent. Their bodies are giving up, Kivex observed, his scales dark with resignation. No, Reyna corrected, not looking up from her work. They're still fighting. Human bodies don't give up. They just need help to keep fighting. She administered the first treatment to the most critical patient, Lieutenant Sarah Foster, whose readings were rapidly approaching terminal levels. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to change. Then, almost imperceptibly, the degradation began to slow. It's working, Reyna breathed, her scales brightening. Their cells are accepting the adaptation template. Quick, prepare doses for the others. As the treatments were administered, Reyna continued to monitor their effects closely. The process wasn't perfect. There were moments of severe cellular shock, times when it seemed the treatment might fail. But slowly, steadily, the human bodies did what they did best. They adapted, they fought, they survived. Hours later, as the crisis finally began to stabilize, Reyna found herself by Commander Chen's bed again, reviewing the latest scans of his recovering crew. You know what the most remarkable thing is, she said softly. It's not just that your bodies can adapt to something that should have killed you. It's that you never lost faith that they would. Chen smiled weakly. He had insisted on providing additional samples throughout the treatment process, despite his own condition. That's the thing about humans, Doctor. We don't believe in impossible odds. We just see problems that haven't been solved yet. A dangerous philosophy, Kivex commented, joining them. His scales showed a complex pattern of concern and admiration. But an effective one, it seems. Dr. Tisari, your unconventional approach has saved these lives and possibly revolutionized our understanding of human medical treatment. Though I still say it was a reckless gamble. With respect, Doctor, Reyna replied, her scales shifting to a confident blue. Sometimes the greatest medical breakthroughs come from being willing to take those gambles. Isn't that what science is about? Pushing boundaries, finding new possibilities. Maybe you've been spending too much time around humans, Kivex said, but his scales showed amusement rather than disapproval. Their attitude seems to be rubbing off on you. As if to prove his point, the medical station's sensors detected something new. The first signs of the surviving crew members regaining consciousness. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had done the impossible. They had survived. And Reyna knew that this was just the beginning of what humans and Arcadians could achieve together. News of the unprecedented treatment spread through the medical station like a quantum wave, bringing both excitement and controversy. Reyna found herself at the center of a storm as the Arcadian Medical Council demanded explanations for her unorthodox methods. Your actions violated 17 different protocols, Council member Virix announced during the emergency review session, her scales a harsh red of disapproval. Combining untested human cellular adaptations with our technology, the potential risks were incalculable. Reyna stood before the council, her scales steady in their determined gold. Through the observation window, she could see the recovery ward where Commander Chen and his crew were healing. Lieutenant Foster had even managed to sit up today, her cells now showing signs of permanent adaptation to the radiation that should have killed her. With respect, Council member, traditional protocols would have resulted in 5 deaths. Sometimes we must adapt our methods to match our patients' needs. This isn't about the outcome, Virix countered. It's about maintaining proper medical procedures. Your human patient's survival, while fortunate, doesn't justify the risks you took. Before Reyna could respond, the council chamber's doors slid open. Commander Chen entered, moving slowly but steadily. Despite Dr. Kvex's protests about him leaving the recovery ward, he had insisted on attending the review. Council members, Chen addressed them formally. I request permission to speak on Dr. Tseri's behalf. The council members' scales flickered with various shades of surprise and irritation. Humans rarely participated in Arcadian administrative proceedings. Virix's scales settled into a diplomatic neutral tone. You may speak, Commander, though I fail to see how this concerns you. Chen's laugh filled the chamber, making Reyna's antennae vibrate with that now familiar pleasant sensation. With all due respect, it concerns me quite directly. Dr. Tseri didn't just save my crew's lives. She demonstrated exactly why humans and Arcadians need to work together. He moved closer to the council's platform, his movements careful but determined. You're right that she broke protocols, but those protocols were written before humans joined the galactic community. They don't account for our biology, our adaptability, or our ways of healing. Are you suggesting we should abandon centuries of medical wisdom simply because humans do things differently? Another council member demanded. No, Chen replied. I'm suggesting you should expand your wisdom to include new possibilities. Dr. Tseri didn't just treat us. She understood us. She saw that our body's natural responses, which your protocols would have suppressed, were actually the key to our survival. Reyna watched in fascination as Chen's passionate defense seemed to affect the council members. Their scales shifted through various colors, indicating deep thought and reconsideration. She had noticed this before. Something about the way humans express themselves could touch even the most logical of species on an emotional level. Furthermore, Chen continued, Dr. Tseri's treatment hasn't just saved lives. It's opened up entirely new avenues of medical research. My crew's adapted cells are showing properties that could revolutionize radiation treatment for multiple species. Dr. Kvex, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. I can confirm this. Preliminary studies suggest the human adaptive response, when properly understood and harnessed, could advance our medical knowledge by decades. The council chamber filled with the soft, rustling sound of scales shifting colors as the members conferred silently among themselves. Finally, Virix spoke again, her scales now showing the blue-green of scientific curiosity. Dr. Tseri, while your methods were unorthodox, we cannot ignore the results. The council proposes the establishment of a new research division, focused on integrating human and Arcadian medical practices. Would you be interested in heading this initiative? Reyna felt her scales ripple with surprise and joy, but she maintained her professional composure. I would be honored, council member. However, I have one condition. Virix's antennae twitched. Oh, I want Commander Chen and his crew to be part of the research team. Their first-hand experience with cellular adaptation would be invaluable. Chen's eyes met hers, and that now familiar surge of chemicals appeared in his bloodstream. Something Reyna had learned was associated with positive human emotions. I think we could arrange that, Doctor. After all, we humans have a saying. The best way to push boundaries is to do it together. As the council session concluded and the new research initiative was formally approved, Raina found herself reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. She had started out simply trying to treat her first human patient, and now she was about to embark on a journey that could transform medical science itself. "You're thinking very loudly," Chen commented as they left the chamber together. "Your scales are doing that shimmer thing they do when you're processing something important." Raina felt her scales flush slightly. "I was just thinking about how sometimes breaking protocol isn't about breaking rules. It's about writing better ones." "Now you're really starting to think like a human," Chen grinned. "Though I have to warn you, that can be dangerous." "I'm beginning to think," Raina replied, her scales shifting to match the gold of her determination, "that some dangers are worth risking." 6 months after the Carina Nebula incident, the Arcadian Medical Station Epsilon had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic medicine. The newly established Human Arcadian Medical Research Center occupied an entire wing, its laboratories humming with activity as researchers from both species worked side by side. Raina stood in her office, reviewing the latest results from their cellular adaptation studies. The wall display showed a mesmerizing dance of human and Arcadian cells interacting in ways that had once been thought impossible. Her scales shifted through patterns of wonder and satisfaction as she considered how far they'd come. "Still working late, Doctor?" Commander Chen's voice came from her doorway. Though fully recovered, he had chosen to remain on the station as the human liaison for the research program. "Your scales are doing that intense focus pattern again." "Look at this," Raina said, gesturing to the display. "We've successfully replicated the adaptive response in non-human tissue. The implications for treating radiation exposure across all species are extraordinary." Chen moved closer, and Raina's antennae detected the now familiar changes in his body chemistry that occurred whenever they worked together. Over the months, she had learned to read human physiological responses almost as well as Arcadian scale patterns. "You've come a long way from being shocked by human biological responses," he teased, referring to their first meeting. "And you've come a long way from being an unconscious patient in my emergency bay," she countered, her scales flickering with amusement. "Though you still manage to surprise me regularly." The station's communication system activated, displaying a message from the Galactic Medical Council. Raina's scales paled slightly as she read it. "They want us to present our findings at the annual Interspecies Medical Conference. Apparently, our research has attracted quite a bit of attention." "Nervous?" Chen asked, noting her color change. "Arcadians don't get nervous," she replied automatically, even as her scales betrayed her anxiety. "We just process concerns thoroughly." "Right," Chen laughed. "And humans don't get stubborn. We just maintain determined focus." Their easy banter was interrupted by an emergency alert. A mining vessel had suffered a catastrophic reactor breach in a nearby sector. Casualties were incoming: humans, Arcadians, and several other species, all exposed to dangerous levels of radiation. "Time to put our research to the real test," Chen said, his expression turning serious. As they rushed to the emergency bay, Raina reflected on how differently she approached crisis situations now. Where once she would have seen only protocols to follow, now she saw possibilities to explore. Where she would have separated patients by species for specialized treatment, now she saw opportunities for integrated care. The casualties began arriving, and the medical teams sprang into action. Raina moved between beds, implementing the hybrid treatments they'd developed, combining the best of human adaptability with Arcadian precision. Chen worked alongside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "Cellular degradation halting in all patients," the medical eye announced. "Adaptive responses initiating across all species." Hours later, as the crisis stabilized and the last patient was declared stable, Raina found herself in the observation room, watching the recovery ward. Humans, Arcadians, and other species lay healing together, their bodies responding to treatments that wouldn't have existed 6 months ago. You know what the really amazing thing is? Chen said softly, joining her at the window. It's not just that we found a way to combine our medical knowledge. It's that we've started to understand each other on a fundamental level. Raina's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. When I first started treating humans, I thought I needed to understand your biology. But what I really needed to understand was your spirit, that incredible drive to push boundaries, to find new solutions, to survive against all odds. And we needed to understand your precision, your careful analysis, your willingness to question traditional approaches while still respecting the wisdom behind them, Chen replied. Together, we're stronger than either of us could be alone. The station's day cycle was beginning to dim, casting a soft light across the recovery ward. In the beds below, patients of different species rested and healed together, their bodies telling a story of barriers broken and boundaries crossed. The conference presentation, Raina said suddenly. I know what we need to focus on. Not just the medical breakthroughs, but this, the way we've learned to bridge our differences and create something new. Chen's hand found hers, a gesture that once would have seemed strange, but now felt natural. That's the real discovery, isn't it? Not just how to heal bodies, but how to bring worlds together. Raina's scales shifted to a new color, one she had never displayed before. A warm, deep gold with hints of shifting blue, like the heart of a star. It was a color that spoke of hope, of possibility, of futures yet to be discovered. As they stood together, watching over their patients and their progress, Raina understood that they had created more than just new medical treatments. They had forged a path forward, a way for different species to work together, learn from each other, and grow stronger through their differences. The pulse of understanding wasn't just about medicine anymore. It was about the rhythm of life itself, beating steady and strong across the boundaries of species and space, bringing hope and healing to all who needed it. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, other doctors, other healers, other species would learn from what they had built here. The bridge between worlds would grow stronger, one heartbeat at a time.